A question I have to ask you about, because we have seemingly been emailed hundreds of times about it, and I guess it's two separate instances. I have some quotes here. Tony Khan recently spoke about you in a couple of different places, a couple of different forums here.
Well, now, wait a minute. I should sound like Taz. And I said, don't you dare put my name in your mouth. And then he gets, I didn't. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, actually, the first time he didn't.
He didn't the first time. That's why I didn't comment on it before, because I didn't want to be taken as being egotistical. And so, that's me.
That would be funny if you did that and he said, no, I was talking about someone else. That would have been good. But no, the first time was at the All Out Media Scrum, after All Out, the post-All Out Media Scrum. And boy, if there was ever a reason to want Jim Cornette and AEW, Jim Cornette participating in a post-event media scrum with the wrestling press. Oh, sign me up to watch that show. But here's Tony's quote. As somebody I look up to said, wrestling fans watch the wrestling program to see the wrestlers wrestle. And even if I don't always follow everything he says, or haven't always made him happy, that is probably the person I've learned the most about the wrestling business from. I don't think he would probably take a lot of credit for me as his protege, but the fact is, he's right about that. And of course, that begs the question, Jim, if he's your protege, does that make me and him half brothers?
I'm not sure. I think, actually, if, more importantly, if Tony and Pockets were to get divorced, who would get custody of the Hartley boys?
That's a good way to look at it.
But nevertheless, but that was a blind item that Tony said, and some people say, oh, Jimmy's talking about you. And well, I didn't want to be the one to come out and say, oh yeah, that's me, because then it looks like I'm being egotistical and expressing a lack of humility. So, and as you said, that he could have said it was somebody else. So I didn't respond to that. But then he went ahead and fingered me as the aforementioned person by name.
Yeah, he pointed you out. Let's just clarify what you meant by saying that. He didn't finger you. He pointed you out.
Well, I'm saying, well, you know what? I'm talking to like they did in the 30s in the gangster movies. He fingered me.
Calling him a stoolie?
He's a stoolie. He fingered me. He dropped a dime. He named names.
Well, Stool Pigeon Khan had these comments recently on the Busted Open show. There's a lot of comments here. I'll read some of it at least. Asked about your criticisms of AEW, he said, quote, to be fair to him, these are his opinions. He says what he thinks, and there is stuff on the show that he's liked before. There's stuff he hasn't liked, and I think he's still like that. He's not saying he loves everything on the show, but he has acknowledged a lot of great stuff that has happened. What really tickled me, and I thought was very cool, was his line about CM Punk's arrival, about his debut appearance in AEW on The First Dance, and I'll never forget it. His exact quote was, well, it wasn't what I would have done. It was a lot better. It was perfect. I thought that was awesome, and it was very fair. It's funny having him say that. I thought that was awesome, and it was very fair.
Well, I guess that was a fair thing, a fair and awesome thing, or a fairly awesome thing to say.
Because I think it was our perfect moment, and it was very cool of him to say that. He's been very fair recently with the stuff he said, and I think that's great. I really admire him, and have looked up to him since I was a small kid. I don't know if I would be doing this without him, because, there are no textbooks on how to be a wrestling promoter. There are no college classes for it. When I was going to school, when I was going to the University of Illinois Laboratory High School, and then the University of Illinois for college, those interviews he used to do...
Wait a minute, the University of Illinois High School?
Laboratory High School.
You've got a high school and a laboratory at the university?
Oh, you've never seen him with a Bunsen burner, I'll tell you. But anyway, back to the scholarly Mr. Khan here. The interviews he used to do, he would sit around for 4 hours plus with the smart fans talking, and guys would tape it with a camcorder. The quality was terrible, but the audio was really important. Excuse me, the audio was what was really important, and he would talk and tell stories about being a wrestling promoter. This is my favorite part right here. The Forbidden Door is something that is an important part of AEW. The ability to bring in stars from the outside, or our stars traveling to other promotions and winning titles, and putting on dream matches. It's very cool, but not a completely new concept. the idea of companies working together. That's something I learned listening to him. Vince McMahon Sr. really was very diplomatic about working with other wrestling companies, and then he goes into a little bit of that, so you get credit for the Forbidden Door now, Jim. I congratulate you on that. And it kind of just goes on from there, but those are really the big quotes that everyone keeps sending around.
Well, and here's the thing. I wonder if Dr. Frankenstein's medical school appreciated the recognition. So I'm caught in a quandary here. It's a paradox. You know what a paradox is, Brian. That's not a couple of doctors. That's not a place you park two boats. I'm being complimented for my wrestling genius by someone who I have basically crucified up on the side of the tallest building in town because he doesn't know how to book. And he said, I learned everything I know from Jim Cornette. So you see where I'm kind of, this could go either way. Here's the problem. And I've never said that Tony Khan was a horrible person. Now, I appreciate him being very kind and complimentary to me about that. I've never said he was a horrible human being. I said he made a major mistake when he got in the wrestling business with who he was listening to. And he, for the first year and a half or so, well, it's been 2 years now, of the television program, we have seen the results of him listening to the wrong people from the start. Whether it is in terms of the ridiculous outlaw talent that he's given exposure to on national television that had no business being in front of 500 people, much less 1 million, or whether it's the balls that he's dropped when he gets things handed to him and these names and stars handed to him. He's dropped some balls on that because he doesn't know how to introduce new talent and give them the fucking push at the start. He brings them in, puts them in main event matches, then fucking starts trying to get them over 6 months later. A lot of backward stuff because he's listening to these knuckleheads that don't know anything about wrestling, that have been stuck in the indie bubble all their lives and think that this, you know, niche audience, minutia subset of people that like parody wrestling, we're going to carry him through. And that's where I've had the problem, because the program could have been a lot better straight out of the fucking box by concentrating on positive talent instead of trying to let everybody participate, and by focusing on what you want to do instead of trying to serve everything from fried chicken to Greek food to sushi to fucking vegan options at the same restaurant. And not having a firm hand and being able to tell people no, and being able to tell people, no, you're going to do this and here's why. Problem is he doesn't know the here's why, because that's what I'm going to get to. You can listen to people talk all day long about wrestling, and I have for 50 years. But the way you learn is by being involved in it and trial and error and doing it and working with those other people. And I'm not saying that I'm a goddamn genius. With the bar lowered these days, I am. But if I was in a room with Eddie Graham and Bill Watts and Roy Shire and Dusty Rhodes and of Dory Funk Sr. and a few other people, I'd be sitting there writing things down and listening. Because I know who knows more than me, and they all did. Because they got to do it over and over for years longer before we fucked up the whole business. You learn by watching what they do, listening to what they say, seeing what they set up, and then hearing the critiques afterwards. Either whether you were involved in it or whether somebody else was involved in it, and you're watching what was going on. You learn by, getting the responses from the fans and seeing what works and what doesn't. And you don't just read books about, I'm sure a heart surgeon can read a lot of books or listen to a lot of videos about people doing heart surgery. But they don't actually let him do it the first time on a fucking patient that has a good chance of survival just for practice. That's what dead bodies are for. Dead bodies, the equivalent in this case in wrestling was local television or an underneath assistant role or something like that to get your wits about you. And then after a period of years, you're invited to become a booker or a matchmaker or something of that nature. You don't do it just by reading up on it, listening to shoot videos, and practicing in your basement. And that's been my bone of contention since the start, because I was more than happy, as I've been quoted to say, I've been more than happy when I heard that a billionaire was going to start a wrestling company. Not for me, but for the entire wrestling business, because I wasn't particularly interested in it to begin with, even before I knew who was going to be involved. But I certainly would have been a more welcoming person to the company if he hadn't said those two things to me. I'm going to be involved with Kenny Olivier and the Young Bucks, and I'm going to be writing the television. And that's what sealed that deal for me. That, okay, I'll just watch this fiasco. And I'm just saying, and that's what it's been. But now that they are getting handed to them major superstars, big time talent, and the other company is not only dropping the ball, but it's a bowling ball and they're dropping it on their foot. They got a chance. They can be a real company, but they cannot continue with the comedy indie talent that is still in some cases at the backbone of their presentation. Go ahead.
I was going to ask you if there is a way to differentiate. Which one would have bothered you more at the time? The fact that he was going to write the TV, or the fact that he was going to be in business, as you put it, with the Young Bucks and Omega?
That he was going to write the TV. That was the big one. Because you can't come back from that. And look, we've seen 2 years of pretty rotten television. And I'm trying to be fair. He's got a second chance I didn't think he was going to have. I had no idea, and nobody could have had the idea, that suddenly Vince McMahon was going to either lose his mind, or Nick Khan's got all the power and doesn't understand anything about wrestling, or whatever the case. But in 2 years, much less in 3 months, that we were going to see CM Punk and Adam Cole and Bryan Danielson and potentially Ric Flair, and where's Bray Wyatt, and there's old Ruby Soho, everybody. Just a mass exodus. Looks like a fire drill trying to get out of Titan Tower. You couldn't see that was going to happen, whether the guys wanted to go work for AEW or not, is they were they have been allowed to leave in most cases with contract malfeasance or just stupid gimmicks. They've been run out the door. So he's got another chance now. And if there was somebody that had some experience in formatting television that he could put in that spot, and I don't know who, and start listening to legitimate talent instead of, all that the Cucamonga kids care about is being the greatest tag team in the world, and they've buried the only opposition, FTR. Every other tag team on the roster is, pretty much. And they're the bosses, so they get all the TV time and they can do whatever they want. You can make a case that Olivier is certainly more talented than the Bucks. He's at least looks like a grown man. Looks like a grown Harpo Marx, but he was a man. And, and he's somewhat of an athlete. He's just got his mind in the fucking clouds. He's an idiot. Mentally, he thinks about wrestling like a fucking buffoon. But, now we're talking real talent. And anyway, I don't know who. I think both sides of this war are blowing up their own ammunition dump. The WWE have gone nuts and they're running people out the door hand over fist. And if there had been a responsible booker in charge of even the mess that they've had over at AEW for the last 2 years, there'd be several guys in a whole lot better position than they are now, and they'd be closer. But as it is, they're kind of meeting in the middle through mutual what the fuckery. So Tony, I appreciate your comments. And if you had 5 or 10 years to work closely with experienced people in this business, you might have got it. But it was like starting out working with Vince Russo the first day that he got allowed in Vince's dining room to start coming up with ideas and start writing the show. He had everything, and you had to sit there and listen to it. And it bogged everything down because you had to explain to him in minute detail so he'd try to get it. Why that was fucking moron shit and didn't work. And then he wouldn't listen. And then when Vince stopped paying close attention to him, he started putting it on the show, and it was the worst television ever presented in wrestling. You will remember everybody in the Attitude Era that was not a big star was doing rotten television. Because Vince McMahon didn't care about really policing that stuff too much. In the same situation with the writers, when they'd come to OVW, I said, what am I going to say to them? I need 5 minutes or 5 years. Either one ain't going to do anything in the middle, ain't going to do either one of us any good. You couldn't just sit down and have some meetings with Tony Khan and say, okay, here's the benefit of 15 years experience being around Eddie Graham, Bill Watts, Dusty Rhodes, blah, 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 blah. Here you go. Here's the things you need to know. Okay, you're all set now. What the fuck? Nobody could do that. Nobody could learn that. So that's why I say that the biggest, besides Tony Khan, spending an incredible amount of money that he didn't need to spend to sign up all of these assholes that were friends of the indie guys that he has to now bury on YouTube because he's got some more real wrestlers, but he's still paying these people. The biggest thing was he decided, I've had a couple of pilots tell me what all the buttons are connected to, so now I'm going to fly this 747. Anyway. So that's been and still remains my biggest issues with that company was who he was going to listen to tell him about wrestling, and the fact that he thought that he could start from scratch, having never done it before, writing a national television wrestling show that made sense. And as we see, both of those have turned out the way that I said they would. They've done a bunch of crummy television, and the guys that I had a fucking issue with are always jacking off and never serious. And he still managed to get within half of where Vince is because Vince has lost his fucking rabbit-ass mind. So this is literally a battle of which team or which side can fuck up to the top.
A few questions, a few follow-ups. Well, first of all, let me just get the big one out of the way. You're giving AEW's TV another chance right now is one of the things you've said a couple times, correct?
Well, it's not I'm giving them another chance. I give them a chance every week. And most of the time it's blah, but now, here lately...
Are you looking at this like a restart with Punk coming in?
I hate restarts indicate that you fucked something up so bad the first time. Or that's when they always tried to restart WCW. I'm like, so you're telling the people, boy, this has been really shitty.
Yeah, I'm not saying they're presenting it like that.
Well, no, but I mean, and even the fast food places go, the new, improved such and such. Yeah, because the other one tasted like fucking swamp water. But it's not a restart, but maybe they can get some of the taste out of people's mouths. Well, again, the people that have been watching, they like this shit. There just ain't enough of them. And when Punk came along, and with Danielson, the pay-per-view, they've done buys. They've got several 100,000 more people to the shows that those guys are on. That's people that haven't been watching that's people that probably watched these guys before in the WWE and say, okay, well, let's see what they're doing there. If they show them the same stupid shit in between the segments with the stars that they like, the people are going to start scoffing at the program, because if they wanted to see a parody of wrestling, they'd have been watching AEW already. And I'm afraid that the mindset of people running the company is, oh, this Young Bucks, Kenny Olivier indie style that we do, everybody's going to love that, and more people are going to love it if they see it. No. The reason why all the wrestling fans have been run off is because they wanted less of that shit, not more of it. In the last 20 years, we've lost 8 of the 10 million people that were watching wrestling every fucking week because it got so silly and phony and stupid with a bunch of kids playing. That's what you hear time after time from everybody that used to watch wrestling and doesn't anymore. And so if now a few 100,000 of those people are either going to come over to the other channel or going to come back watching because of a Punk or a Danielson or some name that they recognize, I'm pretty sure those people don't want to see stupid, silly, childish cosplaying wrestling, which is what drove them away to begin with. So are they going to grow up and be big boys and put on a professional program, or are they going to let these jackoffs continue to hire their high school friends to wear face shields with windshield wipers on them or whatever the fuck? Or, now that they have some female talent, Serena Deeb, Thunder Rosa, Ruby Soho, are they going to continue to spend money and waste television time trying to get Kenny Olivier's fetish objects over? Or are they going to fold their tent on that and concentrate on pushing girls that might stand a chance to fucking get over? To be legitimate, to be professional, not to be stupid and silly and childish. I mean, I'm looking at the fans in the crowd, and I'm wondering, why do they all look like they're in their 20s and 30s when we're writing this shit for people that are 12 and under? But anyway, did you ask a question?
I asked a question, you went there, and, we've been talking about this topic for a while, so I do think we need to move on to a few more topics before we wrap things up, but you will certainly say at least very nice complimentary comments from Tony Conchworth.
Very nice and complimentary. I never said he was a horrible human being. If he had opened up a company that made airplane parts and wanted me to run his airplane part company, I would have thought he was fucking crazy too, because I don't know anything about it. So instead, he wanted the Young Bucks to run his tag team division. And he actually gave these fucking flakes jobs. And that's why he's had a substandard television product far below what he could have had.